Daymare 1998 was and is one of the best neoclassic survival horror games I've played for so many reasons, so naturally I was psyched for and ready to love the long-awaited prequel. Unfortunately, nearly all the things that made the original so special are not in Daymare 1994. It's not all bad, and I plan to go over the pros as well as the cons, but I'm going to do the cons first, that way we can end on the positive. Also, over here to my side, and any clips I show, they're just going to be from the first 60 to 90 minutes a game, so that way there's no big spoilers, and I won't be talking any particulars about the story either. I'd say the biggest sticking point for me, the biggest con, was the fact that there's no more 90s classic or classic 90s mode. In the original, it had this amazing inventory management system, and it was completely optional. You could just run it as normal, where reloads all just acted like they would in any other shooter. But in classic 90s mode, you had a limited number of magazines, and for those magazines, like when you would drop one, you would have to make sure you picked it up later, or you could hold the reload button and it would retain the magazine, but the reload took longer. You had several different types of bullets for a few of the different guns. Like the pistol had high power rounds, then you could manage one magazine loaded with high power, one magazine loaded with regular. It was so immersive and tense. It was like you had to prep yourself before and after every encounter. You would literally take inventory. It was really immersive, really good. It, again, optional, but clearly it was the way that the developers meant for the game to be played. So that's how I played it, and I didn't regret it for a second. It was so good. But in 1994, nothing like that. There's one setting that you can change for, it's like auto reloads. You can be firing, and if you start firing with an empty gun, you can have a setting that says it's just not going to fire, or a setting that says it's going to automatically reload your gun, which is not nearly the same thing. Also, on the subject of weapons and weapon management, you start with all the weapons that you're going to get in the entire game. You start with your SMG, and you start with a shotgun, and you will not get anything else aside from your frost grip, which I do know that, you know, when you go to upgrade your frost grip, you get certain offensive and even a defensive capability. I didn't try the frost shield that was available because that just didn't seem like a plausible tactic. Some things like a frost bomb and a frost mine, those are the two main things that you can get and then upgrade. I literally never used the frost mine, and the frost bomb I used a couple times during encounters, which I failed. And when I restarted it, it was just the standard either frost bullet or holding down for the liquid nitrogen spray. In 1998, Daymare 1998, you had, I think, 7 weapons total across the multiple characters that you played. You never had them all at once, but there were 7 different weapons. And like I said, a few of those weapons had different ammo types to manage, as well as what weapons were appropriate for whatever encounter you were facing. Again, the frost grip, you can upgrade, and it, I suppose, counts as different weapons because they do different functions. They perform different functions in different combat scenarios. But the thing is, you don't really have to worry about that too much given the enemy types, which I'll get into in a little bit. Another big disappointment in this one is the puzzles are extremely simple. There are no fun, esoteric kind of puzzles that you'd get in a Resident Evil game or in the original 1998, or really just a lot of classic survival horror where it's, you know, Spencer Mansion kind of stuff. You couldn't believe that somebody would actually design this, but they're really fun to figure out. And I think that's an important facet. In 1994, it's basically all physical and electronic types of puzzles, and they're extremely easy to figure out, with the caveat of hacking. On easy hacking and medium hacking, it's kind of a number letter puzzle. You have to figure out this alphanumeric thing, and you can swap the vertical lines downward and the horizontal lines, I think, to the right only. So you can kind of, and you have a time limit, I think 45 seconds on those two, and you have to make all the letters and numbers line up to the code that you have. And it's relatively engaging. It's more engaging than it was in 1998, which was, I think, just you tapped bumpers at the right times, and the difficulties of the hacking was basically just how fast the little sliders were moving on either side, and maybe how much time you have left. It's been a little bit since I played 1998. But on hard and very hard hacking in 1994, I genuinely never got one. And there were plenty. There were plenty of doors and lockers and all kinds of stuff like that to get weapon parts, good ammo, like a lot of ammo, stuff like that. It's so hard, and I think the concept of it isn't difficult for me. There are these little mines that if they pass over the center horizontal line, you fail immediately, whether or not you had time left or not. But adding in a time limit to that fried my noggin, and that's not a complaint. I think if people are able to get through hard and very hard hacking with only the 45 or 30 seconds that they're allotted, that is superhuman to me. I don't do well with time limits. I remember when I first played Siphon Filter, it gives you a 20-minute time limit to do a fairly small amount of tasks. Like, you can do it in probably 4 minutes. But the fact that that timer was there just absolutely freaked me out, and it took forever to get through that level. I think it was the second level of Siphon Filter. So yeah, the hacking is good. Really hard for a brain like mine, I guess. It might not be hard for other people, but it was really hard for me. But the lack of the esoteric Resident Evil style puzzles that the first game had plenty of was just kind of a little bit of a bummer. It wasn't a full-on deal breaker, but I definitely wish there was more strange kind of puzzles to figure out. Every puzzle in there was very straightforward. Now, the core gameplay loop is obviously the combat, and the combat is extraordinarily arcadey. When you walk into an area where there are enemies, in a regular kind of zombie game, the enemies would, maybe they'd be on the floor, and then you're walking around doing your thing, and they go, "Ugh," and they get up, and you're like, oh no, zombies, woo. In this one, you walk into an area, it's almost like Devil May Cry. You walk into an area, and they teleport in, and all the exits to the area are locked or blocked. Or in one case, I thought that I might have finally found a combat encounter that I could just run past to a ladder, and it just, like, the little X icon on the ladder was crossed out. It wouldn't let me move on. There were no barriers. There was nothing stopping me from going up on this ladder, except the fact that the game wanted me to complete their combat encounter. And then once you beat it, everything unlocks. You can move up the ladder. And the reason I say it's very Devil May Cry is there's a certain kind of enemy that actually puts up physical glowy barriers on doors and exits, just like paths out of the combat area. You have to kill everything, and then the barriers go away. It's just like a demon door, or whatever they were called in Devil May Cry 4, I think, is the one I'm thinking of, with the big red blocks when you it wouldn't let you move on without killing everything. That was especially irritating to me because very early on in the game, there's this part where a bunch of enemies pop in, and one enemy in particular, which you can't fight with your current equipment. You need the frost grip, which you don't have at that point, so it's really early on. And the game has you run away from the encounter. And I think one of the core, the key tenets of survival horror is the fact that you shouldn't and don't have to kill everything. There, especially in the recent Resident Evil, like the 2 and 3, Resident Evil remakes 2 and 3, there are many zombies that you just can leave alone, and it's probably wise to leave alone so you can just save your ammo. They're not going to get you. They're easily juked, bypassed, all that stuff. Same thing in the classics, obviously. Like, anyone who goes around killing literally every single zombie is not being terribly frugal with their ammo. So it's just so mind-boggling to lock you into combat encounters and not let you leave until you've killed everything, especially because they tout inventory management as a feature of this game. So as far as inventory management goes, I never had any issues with inventory management. I was never too terribly low on anything, and I was not full up in my inventory until the very last combat encounter. And that was mainly because, due to the nature of the fight, a lot of items were respawning. It's kind of hard to explain without spoilers, so I'm not going to go into it. But yeah, that's the only time I was just like, okay, well, maybe I should drop the frost grip refill so I can grab a health pack, because I'm running relatively low on those compared to the frost grip refills or something like that. It was last 10 minutes of the game. So to say it's inventory management centric is just not true, because the only thing you can do to conserve ammo is not miss and get headshots. You can't just not fight, which is something you can do in basically every other survival horror game when it comes to scrub enemies. And speaking of enemies, there is a notable lack of enemy variety. It's shocking, really. There are 3 enemy types, and another point going back to it being arcadey is they're all glowing this big zappy electric, either blue or red. Blue means go ahead and shoot them. Red means you have to freeze them before you can shoot them. And so, I mean, if you want to get technical, I don't think one of those enemies actually has the electricity. They're just standard. So there are 5 enemy types. You've got the 2 standard ones in either blue or red, and then you've got this 3rd enemy type, which frustratingly is presented like a boss. And I was just like, oh, this one's got bosses. Nice. The first one didn't have bosses that I can recall. I'm almost entirely sure there were no bosses whatsoever in 1998. But in that one, it was fine. I'm not really sure why it was fine in that one, but I didn't feel cheated by the fact that there were no big Resident Evil style bosses in there. But in this one, I really thought there would be. And if you played the demo or watched my video of me playing the demo, the enemy that shows up in that cutscene before the demo stops and you don't get to fight it absolutely makes it look like, hey, you just made it to boss number 1. But turns out that enemy is... You're going to fight like 50 of them over the course of the game. They pop in all the time. They're terribly annoying. They're a one-hit kill. That's the enemy type that physically bars doors and hallways and stuff like that. They're the ones that you have to kill them. So instead of bosses, they like to give you massively wild combat scenarios. At one point, this one type of enemy that's a one-hit kill, you walk into a room and you have to just fight 5 of them at the same time. And this enemy teleports. It'll just blink out of existence and then teleport within 5 feet of you. They are a grappling enemy. It's not like they swing and get you in one hit. They grapple. There's no... that part, I have, I think, probably about 90 minutes of footage in, like, because I captured the whole game as I played. 90 freaking minutes of just doing this part over and over and over until I found out the cadence that the game wants you to do it in. Which brings me to another point. There's basically no room for multiple playstyles. Each encounter has a very... I mean, you might be able to make it work some other way, but really in each encounter there is going to be one series of events that gets you through it without losing a ridiculous amount of health, or missing your opportunity to freeze the little energy balls that come out of the dead enemies, because if you miss that, it'll either go into another enemy and make it a big red enemy, which is harder to deal with in a group, or it'll zap to a dead body somewhere around and just add another enemy to or basically replace the enemy that you just killed. Now it makes it, I want to make it perfectly clear that I'm not complaining about the mechanics. Everything about this game is smooth as hell. It's a really good looking game. The fighting is good. It's just, if you played the first one, which was genuinely tense and inventory management heavy, not even heavy, like, that is the game. Making sure that you've got your magazines loaded with the right stuff before each encounter, all that stuff. Coming from that, this game is an astonishing step back. But as just a game, looking at it as only what it is a good game. And I'll go into the reasons why I think that if you just stop comparing it to 1998, it is a good game. The pros will come, I promise. Finally, my last con that I can think of right now. Oh wait, actually, no. I was just thinking about the weapons. In the first game in 1998, I'm pretty sure there was a melee. Like if you were not aiming and you hit the trigger, you would do a melee. No melee here. No melee. Even though there's a certain enemy type, like just the red regular dude who sprints at you if you can't get your freeze ray up in time. It would be so nice to just be able to pop them real quick and then freeze them. The interrupting grabs was basically all it was good for in 1998 too, so it baffles me. And I'm trying to think. I know I tried to hit trigger, but I wonder if I needed to hit something else to make it happen. So, don't quote me on it not being there, but it certainly didn't tell me how to do it. Like no tutorializing on how to do a melee. So the last thing then, the last con, in 1998 there were dozens or even scores of horror movie, horror book, and horror game references. There's this one street that it's just got all these like signs and whatnot, and there were so many references just on this one street. I remember one of them I was super impressed by because I had just recently watched Arachnophobia again, and I remember seeing the name of the doctor in Arachnophobia on one of the doors. Like, if I hadn't watched Arachnophobia within a couple weeks of playing that game, I would have completely blanked on that reference. I would have just, there were so many good references. And in this one, there is one that I noticed. One reference, and it was to The Shining. The collectibles you get, there are these little alien bobbleheads that you can find and shoot, and they unlock these kind of collectible coin doodads, these medals, and each of them have pop culture alien references with like kind of unique art to make it uniform. It's hard to explain without showing it. I might actually find that footage and show it, but that was fun-ish, but that's not nearly the level of just genre love that was poured into 1998. I don't know. It just, obviously that's more of a me con. Like, probably a lot of other people aren't going to care that much. It was just something I loved so much about the first one. I was looking everywhere for references, but yeah, it wasn't really finding any. Okay, so enough negative talk. Yeah, for me, for what I was looking for to come out of this game, I was a little disappointed. I was actually more than a little. I was disappointed. But there are some really well done things. There are some things that were better done than the first one. Like, I think Delilah Reyes is so much more likable than either of the two people you play as in... I mean, you technically play as three people because you start out as Liev, but any of the playable characters in Daymare 1998, Delilah Reyes is head and shoulders above all of them stacked on top of each other. I think she's a great character, great model, just a really aesthetically pleasing model, good acting, good voice acting. There are some goofy things like in these even in the big budget games. Sometimes there's a teeth problem. Like Resident Evil characters always have some crazy looking teeth when now, even though it sags just a little bit in the middle, it's not a super long game. I'll get into that in a second, but the opening area and the final area are super strong. They're great environments to explore. They're very aesthetically pleasing. In the final area, the puzzles get a little, they're still not like Resident Evil level weird, but there's this really cool, almost like a hotel or apartment complex style thing that you explore, and that was probably my favorite place in the entire game. I thought it was so well orchestrated. There was even a little bit of a jump scare in there that got me, even though it was just some regular ass blue dude electrical goofball. He was placed in such a way that startled me. And for the opening, I thought I don't know if it was intentional or if it's just the environment and the squad dynamic moving in was just similar enough for me to take notice, but it had a real Dino Crisis feeling to it. Like you're walking past all these things with your crew, your commander and your compatriot, I guess, and you're walking through it just has a really similar feel to the opening of Dino Crisis. My expectations were high as soon as it started walking into the actual facility. It was there were some great choices made in the environments and just the kind of vibe. Even though in the middle it gets a little bit samey, the beginning and the end, or like not even just the end, but the last 35% of the game is pretty decent. And speaking of percentages of the game, it was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be for how much I paid. It actually did this interesting thing where it felt like it was coming to an end. It felt very final what was going on, and then there was an astounding amount left. And I say astounding amount. I think my completion time for it was about 6.5 hours, and I played it on PS5, $35 on PS5, and yeah, it felt like a decent length for the price, especially since it's not easy. I wouldn't say it's easy. Like it's not difficult in the same ways as Daymare 1998, but it is hard. It's very fast paced. In a lot of ways, aside from, reminding me of Devil May Cry, it actually reminds me of Doom 2016. It wants you to do very specific things to specific types of enemies, and it wants you to do it in like a fluid succession. Not a bad way to go. It's just so fast paced, and I just didn't think the enemies were scary at all. It wasn't even Resident Evil 4 type scary, which isn't so much but it's more frenetic. Like you're starting to sweat. Everything is going so fast. You're limited on ammo. I think that's what it was trying to go for, but it ended up being a little more Doom than Resident Evil 4. Finally, the story is good. I wouldn't say it's like excellent or even a selling point for the game, but it's a lot more story heavy, I think, than the first one was. The first one you get a lot of information in documents and a couple cutscenes. In this one, so many cutscenes. Like I think that's why my completion time surprised me. It did not feel like it was only 6.5 hours. It felt a lot longer, and I imagine that's because cutscenes aren't included in the completion time, and there are a lot of cutscenes, and they're very pretty. It's got just enough cheese to give you that 90s nostalgia for, don't open that door. It's not that bad. It's not nearly that bad. But yeah, great cutscene cutscenes that do a lot of the storytelling. There's of course plenty of documents. You have this scanner thing that if you scan certain objects, it'll like unlock different. It'll like hack a document for you to read, kind of thing. I don't recall. I was actually a little surprised that they didn't implement the scanner more in puzzle solving, but I don't think anything I scanned pertained to puzzles in any way. It was just more of a collectible mechanic. In fact, on the pause menu, you see, if the area has both, you'll see two icons. You'll see a little alien head icon, like a classic gray man alien head, and then you'll see an icon of your scanner, and it'll be a number, or if you're just starting the area, it'll be a 0/ however many there are. So if it's a 0/2 on the scanner and a 0/1 with the alien face, that means there's one bobblehead collectible and two things you can scan in the area. So it's really just a collectible mechanic, which again, a little surprising that they didn't decide to put that scanner into use for puzzles. But, you know, that's the direction they went. So if there's a thesis statement to be made about Daymare 1994 Sandcastle, it's the same thing that the thumbnail said. It is a disappointing follow-up. But if you disregard the pedigree of the first one and just, like, if you haven't played it, you haven't played Daymare 1998, you didn't even know there was a Daymare 1998, this game probably won't disappoint you. It's just so very different. So when held up next to it, it pales in comparison, which was really disappointing because I was looking forward to this game for so long. And like I said, that beginning had that real Dino Crisis feel to it. I really wanted to like this game, and I don't hate it. I am disappointed, but I don't think like my time was wasted. I think it was a fine experience. So do with that information what you will. Weigh the pros, weigh the cons. Decide if $35 is enough for a game that isn't at all like the game that probably put this one on your map at all. Like, I would find it surprising if anybody saw this game and said, "Ooh, that looks sweet," who didn't already play the first one. But I could be wrong. If you've got any alternate takes, this is just my personal take. I am not a reviewer per se. I'm just telling you that, I mean, I told you enough already, I think. So, this has been Horror and Cats. I've been Smokey Lyle. Let me know in the comments what you think about it, or if this swayed you one way or another, I suppose. But also do your research. Like, this one's a fairly negative review. Maybe watch a positive one. Maybe they cover something that I just kind of shrugged off that you would actually think is really cool, you know? Just watch some positive as well as negative. You always got to take in both sides of the news source because nobody is truly unbiased, right? So, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.